Hello to our friends listening on News Radio 600 Kogo. This is Voice of San Diego on the radio, and I am Andrew Keats, joined by my good friend, Sarah Libby.
What's up?
Pal, it has been a week.
It has.
It has, I mean, it's absurd that it's only Thursday, but a lot has happened.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
All right, so first and foremost, we'll get to, I mean, there's even some big things that basically have gone undiscussed this week. As a result
I think that's very fair to say.
Yeah. The big thing, for our purposes, was what happened on Tuesday, which is indictments were filed against Duncan Hunter Jr., the congressman from the 50th District here in San Diego, and his wife, Margaret Hunter. 60 counts between them, we learned today at the arraignment. And as shocking as just that is, that top line, the details within the 47-page indictment were perhaps even more shocking.
Yeah, and you would think that there's not much room there, given what Morgan Cook at the UT has already... There's already so much absurdity in what she's been reporting for the last 2 years of, like, rabbit airline travel and Irish dancing and video games and whatnot.
Yeah.
And yet, these were shocking.
Yes. Well, so they got text messages and emails, basically, between Duncan Hunter and his campaign treasurer, which I think that color elevated the level of absurdity.
Yes.
So I don't know. Do you want to maybe the best way to do this? So we're going to go through and break down this indictment on a number of different levels. Then we'll get to hero and goat and what have you. Maybe first things first. Let's pull out some choice pieces from the indictment that people might not have seen. You've got some stuff there.
Yeah, so I think one thing that's been pulled out is the stuff involving the military. Obviously, he's a Marine veteran, and yet there are some really damning and also just wild stuff in there. He allegedly misspent funds at the Miramar commissary. That's like a tamer accusation. And then one of them is like at this lavish vacation in Italy that cost over $14,000, a family vacation. It sounds like they maybe tried to tour a Navy base so that they could say that this was like a campaign-related trip and were rebuffed by the Navy. And, you know, I won't say the quote that's in the indictment. It's not very family-friendly, but you can guess
off.
That he wasn't happy. I think the Navy can go F itself, essentially.
Yeah, the entirety of that branch of the military came under the ire of Duncan Hunter for not scheduling a tour at his convenience.
To write off a $14,000 vacation to Italy.
And so the details there's another one that's pretty offensive is he wanted to buy a Hawaiian shirt, already offensive.
Sure.
But his wife tells him, well, go to the golf club and buy it there, because then you can say that the expense was you were buying golf balls for the wounded warriors.
Yeah, you could lie that this was a donation to wounded warriors. And that's what a lot of the justifications they discussed were for church events and meetings with, these schools. Like, these are all donations to children and schools and churches and the military. And so it's really, those are maybe some of the tamer things in there, but it's really shocking to think that these were who they were using to justify personal expenses.
It reads like he got the world's worst legal advice somewhere along the line, as if someone told him, like, look, all you need to do is have the tiniest shred of plausibility that this is related to the campaign.
Right.
And as long as you can say anything that contains a modicum of truth, then you're in the clear.
Right. So, you go out to like a lavish steak dinner, you spend the whole day golfing, you do all these things, but maybe you talked about how the campaign's going, and so that justifies it.
It's a campaign expense.
Right.
Yeah. Like 30 shots of tequila at one dinner.
Yeah, at El Tamarindo, where I had a birthday in D.C.
Yes.
Great pupusas.
Yeah, the foodie world of D.C. has had a lot of fun discussing the Tamarindo.
Yeah, DC and
Matchbox.
San Diego.
Yeah.
Matchbox, delicious.
What, Cowboy Star here in San Diego?
Cowboy Star, Island Prime. It's really like a where to go in San Diego if you want to look at it a certain way.
Good taste if you want to.
Prado, Balboa Park.
Yeah.
Just like delightful
like
time
nice
he
spots.
sure had.
Yeah. Like do you think you would have had a wholly different take if it was like, wow, this guy is eating at Tacos El Gordo every day? You'd be like, all right, this seems okay.
I'm not as into golf, and so that seems like a bit excessive there. That too is like literally every golf club in San Diego appears to be on that list.
Good. Well, thank goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So those are the allegations. What maybe shouldn't be surprising, but I somehow still have the capacity to be surprised, was the way he's chosen to defend himself. There's
been a few different ways he's gone about it, and they all seem relatively absurd. Here, so he delivered one interview to 10 News, and I think this snippet of this quote to 10 News really encapsulates what his strategy seems to be.
This is the new Department of Justice. This is the Democrats' arm of law enforcement. That's what's happening right now, and it's happening with Trump, and it's happening with me, and we're going to fight through it and win, and the people get to vote in November. So we'll see.
So yeah, that's it. It's basically just piggybacking on the defense that Donald Trump is already running with, and just saying like "me too" at the end of it.
Yeah, and it's shocking for somebody who's essentially made his whole career like defending law enforcement and really like theatrically defending law enforcement. He memorably had that whole episode where there were art displays from students in the Capitol, and one depicted like police in a derogatory way, and he removed that painting not once but multiple times, and just how dare anyone debase police officers. He stood up for Border Patrol agents and ICE agents, and just always is going to bat for law enforcement, and now law enforcement is out to get him.
Yeah. So it seems absurd to even have to mention this, but we will for posterity. The interim director for the U.S. Attorney's Office here in San Diego was appointed by Jeff Sessions,
right,
who is a Republican and who was appointed by Donald Trump.
Yes.
So it is not the Democrats' Department of Justice. That's just not true. I guess, it seems absurd to even say that because obviously that doesn't matter, and that isn't the point. The point isn't to actually make a good faith argument. I think it's like this new world we live in where you don't have to say anything that's true or even plausible. You just have to say something. Mm-hmm. And as long as you've offered any sort of rebuttal, that gives permission for the people who are already going to support you to say, well, no, okay, you just needed something to point to. You just needed to say something, anything.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what case his lawyers make, because certainly in court they're not going to argue before a federal judge that this is, hashtag deep state or whatever. That's not going to be the entirety of their legal argument, I assume.
Is it not? Maybe.
I assume. Presumably you can pay for good lawyers, but it seems like maybe that's not true given the state of their finances, which is laid out in excruciating detail in the indictment. And they also were released on bond today with their attorneys pleading for the court to consider their financial situation. They're living paycheck to paycheck, they told the court.
Yeah.
Granted, they're pretty big paychecks.
They are. Yeah. So he's not he shouldn't be a poor guy. If he might have made some decisions that have put him in a bad position. There was a Politico article a few months ago about where Duncan Hunter is in his current life that spelled out a pretty sad state of affairs, that for somebody who appears to be flaunting the law and decency, basically, it actually did drum up some sympathy, just because it just seemed like a sad guy who's going through it. The indictment reflects that as well. It also lays out pretty clearly a number of instances. when you read an indictment, you can see the things that that prosecutors are saying that is relevant to the prosecution, and see things that they're also laying out that may not be relevant, but like they're leaving breadcrumbs in there.
Yes.
So one of those things is, I mean, they are heavily insinuating that he's got multiple affairs going on at any given time. And that he's taking them out.
Yeah, they take pains to point out, like that the Uber ride he charged was at 7 a.m. from an acquaintance's apartment.
Right. Details that don't necessarily matter.
Right.
Right. So there's one other thing that's going on here that is like, it seems like we here in San Diego are well positioned around a number of these new things that are happening in the country. I think the Filner situation prepared us amply for the Me Too movement.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
I think like we had a lot of those conversations already. Now this Duncan Hunter situation is bringing Trump's deep state conspiracy theories into our local politics that we now have to grapple with. I don't know. It seems like we're through the looking glass a lot.
Yeah, and beyond that, if you kind of zoom out, it's just been like a very bizarre week in terms of all the various like Trump ties to what's happening. Perhaps it's because the local campaigns are kind of in a lull. They don't really ramp back up until after Labor Day, and so maybe there's a vacuum. But there's, Monday, Trump weighed in with an endorsement of Diane Harkey, who's running for Congress, and that kind of set the tone for the week, and it has not let up.
Did you see somebody pointed out that she blasted out the endorsement and her thank you of it like just a couple hours before the Manafort sentence and Cohen plea?
Yeesh.
Maybe held off on that one. But
well, I don't know.
What are you going to
do?
And what are you going to do? Like
if you still support him after what has gone on so far, who's to say that the indictment would be the thing?
And it's become pretty clear that there is no, and here's something else we should get into because this is another interesting thing that happened this week, but it's become pretty clear that there's no real viable path, or doesn't seem to be a viable path for Republicans running against Trump. That seems not to have worked out for the people who have tried it.
Yeah, and we got a taste this week of somebody who might.
Yes.
So after those indictments, and these are separate from the Duncan Hunter indictments because, again, it's been quite a week.
Yeah.
These are people affiliated with Donald Trump. Bonnie Dumanis came out with a statement that I think was surprising even to people who follow this closely. She's certainly not a fan of Donald Trump and has made that clear.
You said it on this very show?
Yeah, but she released this statement. She's, the former DA running for county supervisor, and came out with this statement that says there's a stark reality that every Republican, Democrat, and Independent should face head on. This president has proven an embarrassment in his actions and his response to the legitimate investigation into his administration and his campaign. We can no longer tolerate the culture justifying this behavior. As a former judge and DA, I refuse to stand by any longer in tolerating the reckless behavior of Donald Trump, which at a minimum shows negligence, if not collusion.
I mean, it's quite a statement. She didn't mince words there.
No.
Right? I mean,
yeah.
And the other thing, so like, all right, there seems to be a general snark towards Republicans making statements against the president, but then not backing them up with concrete actions.
Mm-hmm.
Setting that aside,
the Jeff Flakes of the world,
Jeff Flakes
and whatnot.
of the world right now. But Bonnie DeMott, no one was yearning for Bonnie's take on these. She took it upon herself.
Yeah, this was very proactive. It wasn't
right.
at a campaign event. It was just an
she posted
email
it
that she elected to send out, and she posted it on her social media.
She posted it like late Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Like it seemed, I'm psychoanalyzing here a little bit, but it seems very much like an individual watching what was happening. It was just like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to say something.
It's interesting. So one thing that I'm always like, I'm hyper vigilant about the ways in which national media talks about San Diego.
Yes.
And it drives me crazy when people kind of purport to understand a place that happens to be in the news for 5 minutes or whatever. And so earlier in the week...
but meanwhile, you were very angry at me for offering my expert insight into Ohio's 10th congressional district a couple weeks ago, even though
still...
I don't think I've got enough credit for that bit. That was a pretty good bit. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you.
So Sean King, who's a progressive activist, occasional journalist, not sure how that works.
Yeah.
He was very involved in advocating for Genevieve Jones Wright during the DA's campaign, and he made several statements to the same effect, which is something he tweeted on Monday before the Bonnie statement that makes this seem even more ridiculous in hindsight. It said, in California, Hillary Clinton won San Diego County and Sacramento County by 20% over Donald Trump. It was a blowout, but the state National Democratic Party machines have allowed Trump-supporting Republicans to completely control the justice systems in those counties. And
the justice systems in these counties, I won't pretend to know much about Sacramento. I do know about San Diego. The current district attorney and the former district attorney are not Trump-supporting Republicans.
They're not. And in fact, one of them just came out with a statement that she had no reason.
I mean, she's running for county supervisor.
Right.
She's not going to vote on an impeachment articles of impeachment.
Just this idea. I mean, by all means, if you're a criminal justice reform advocate, I think there's plenty in Bonnie Dumanis and Summer Stephan's record that is open to scrutiny or open to conversation about changes or different ways things could be done. But to say that these are like extreme right-wing actors and particularly Trump supporters, they're just not.
I think Sean King referred to Summer Stephan in the primary as like Jeff Sessions of California or something like that.
Yeah, and he was saying that
not true.
He used right wing to characterize her when she got support from Democrats like Juan Vargas and Mara Elliott, and it's not true.
Yeah, I know.
So
it's frustrating. Okay, well, so speaking additionally of people potentially swooping in, there suddenly is now a lot of attention on the 50th California's 50th congressional district and whether this has suddenly become a pickup opportunity for Democrats. It doesn't seem like it should be seen that way.
It doesn't.
Yeah,
this is another, like you said, instance of people swooping in. And by all means, I think write your profiles of the Democratic challenger.
Yeah, I mean, look,
Ammar Campa-Najjar.
Elections matter. Take an election seriously. We don't need to predict it before its outcome. But it does seem like there has been a relative lack of context around just how conservative this district is.
Yes.
And that even following this indictment, that this is not close to a toss-up seat.
It doesn't seem like it. I think the most, prognosticators have been willing to do is move it to likely Republican instead of
safe.
Definitely Republican.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that says something because that indictment was pretty damning and they're not even willing to entertain it as a toss-up, and I don't think they should.
Yeah. I mean, so in the primary, the collective Republicans that ran, which is Hunter and two others, got 62% of the vote.
Right.
So, it wasn't close.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is more Democratic than you might expect it to be. I think it was 14 or 15 Republicans had like a 15-point status quo advantage there previously. So they dipped a little bit below that in the primary. But that's still such a long way to go in the general.
Yeah.
And so the person running is Ammar Campa-Najjar.
Mm-hmm.
He got a large profile in the New York Times today.
Yeah.
Just like a couple minutes ago, I got a push alert from it. He's been making the rounds. He's all over the place. I suspect we're going to see a big boost in his fundraising.
Sure.
That taking place from this week. I've seen basically every national Democrat has signal blasted his donation page. So I imagine he'll get more money, and that's what you need to to make a race like this competitive in the first place. And now he'll certainly have a lot of ammo. But again, it's just the status quo expectation should be that this is not really up for grabs.
I would think so. And I honestly don't think that, supportive words from people like Nancy Pelosi go very far in a district like that. I mean, you never know. Doug Jones has a Senate seat in Alabama.
Yes. And to that point, this is less Republican. This has a smaller Republican advantage than both the state of Alabama and the Pennsylvania 18th district that Connor Lamb won earlier this year. So it's not impossible. It is not impossible. And by all means, Ammar should run a spirited campaign, and he's got wind at his back to some extent. But let's just not fool ourselves about the lift that he has ahead.
Right. It's big.
All right. So we're going to take a quick break here. We will come back on the other side and go over a little bit of news that was buried this week, specifically another Republican from East County who is in certainly legal trouble, potentially other, political trouble. Certainly political trouble, potentially legal trouble,
yes,
I should say.
That's the way.
We will also do our hero and goat of the week. You may have noticed that Scott Lewis is not here. Do
people notice, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, he's difficult to ignore.
That's true. Yeah.
But he'll be back next week. Also, if you guys gotten your tickets for PolitiFest, you should. We're going to talk about all of the things that are on the ballot this year. If you want to be informed, you should be at PolitiFest and hear about all those things.
It's coming up.
Anyway, thank you to our friends at News Radio 600 Kogo. We'll be right back.
This Voice of San Diego podcast is sponsored in part by Competitive Edge Research. As a nonprofit news organization, Voice of San Diego depends on our members, foundations, and sponsors like Competitive Edge Research. We are very grateful for all of our supporters, and we will recognize their support during the show. Competitive Edge Research, San Diego's premier public opinion research firm, sponsors this podcast because they like good journalism as much as they like good polling. Since 1987, Competitive Edge has helped clients see the why buried deep within the numbers. Competitive Edge designs comprehensive research studies, collects bulletproof data, and employs robust analytics so you'll understand why things are the way they are. Competitive Edge. Know what to do. And if you like Voice of San Diego's work and want to become a sponsor, contact us at development@voiceofsandiego.org.
And we're back in the great Voice of San Diego podcast studio. Hope you guys enjoyed whatever those ads were that they dropped in. We don't know what they are until I hear the show later. But let's get right into it with our hero of the week. This goes to an odd group of people that collectively are known as Padres Twitter. Padres Twitter has...
Are you part of Padres Twitter?
I'd say I dabble.
Okay.
I'd say
you're a fringe member?
Yeah, I'm a fringe member.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a fringe member. I think the issue is that I'm also a member of Orioles Twitter, and I think there's rules about being members of like two fraternities.
Sure.
So, but Padres Twitter has legitimately established itself as like a social movement at this point.
Yeah,
like
a watchdog of sorts.
Yeah. So what happened this week is some people on Padres Twitter, I should get one woman's name. She refers to herself as Geekster, though that is not her name. I'll search for it in a second while you talk, Sarah. But a group of people on Padres Twitter got very angry that the San Diego Padres continue to bring Brian Giles and Marcus Giles, who are ex-players, in for alumni and events associated with the Padres.
Promotional events.
Like an alumni softball game was a recent example. The reason is both of them have been found guilty in a court of law of domestic violence.
Yes.
And certainly 10 plus years ago when these things happened, that sort of thing had a different role in sports.
Yeah.
Neither of them were suspended by MLB at the time that it took place. They certainly would now. One of the incidents was actually caught on a surveillance camera and could be witnessed, kind of like a proto Ray Rice type situation. But nonetheless, after this effect, this has happened years later, the Padres have continued to have this relationship with Brian and Marcus Giles, who are hometown kids. They grew up in El Cajon. And Padres Twitter basically just flipped out and said, this is unacceptable. We don't want them to continue to be invited to these games. It dampens our enjoyment of supporting the team to have them associated with it. And I told you on Monday, I was like, this is becoming a thing.
Yes.
Padres Twitter is like turning this into something.
Humble brag.
Yes. And then a day and a half later, the Padres announced that they were severing ties with Brian and Marcus Giles and they would not be invited to these sorts of events anymore.
Yeah.
And earlier this year, like basically the same thing happened. The Padres radio flagship home had built a niche for itself as like a man show for the 21st century. It was a very misogynistic format, basically, and that mushroomed until eventually one of their hosts put out a joke about making light of the suicides on the Coronado Bridge and said, jump
right
to a new morning show or something stupid like that. And again, Padres Twitter just lost its mind, swarmed on this issue, and within a day, that person had been suspended. He was later fired. And then the Padres radio flagship home just changed formats entirely based on this. So like this group of rabid Padres fans that spends a lot of time on Twitter talking about the team and associated issues have essentially forced accountability on a major public entity in San Diego. It's not a public agency, but obviously it's like a public trust of some kind in San Diego on two occasions this year.
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
It's great.
So I do want to get the woman's name that she calls herself Geekster. I wish it was easy to search for Geekster on Twitter, but she wrote a letter. She calls herself Padres Geekster. I unfortunately at Padres Geekster. In any case, at Padres Geekster wrote a letter to the team, formally putting Padres Twitter's concerns in writing. And that seemed to have been a big issue as well. So special shout out to Padres Geekster. Okay, that's that. Our GOAT of the week.
You lose! Good day, sir!
This one goes to State Senator Joel Anderson, who I guess caught a bit of a break in that the Duncan Hunter news completely dwarfed what would otherwise be a pretty major scandal.
Yeah.
It was front page news at the LA Times, Sacramento Bee for a brief, fleeting moment before larger events took their place. So the Senate Rules Committee has opened an investigation after a female lobbyist accused Anderson of threatening to bitch slap her and harassing her at a bar in Sacramento. The woman is a lobbyist for the California Nurses Association, and the event was witnessed by other lobbyists, and the bar restaurant where it took place confirmed that they removed a patron for threatening to harm another female patron. Essentially said, yes, this happened.
Yeah, there was a number of witnesses, it seems.
Yes. And I guess if there's any redemption to be had in this incident, it's that Joel Anderson's response has not been like Duncan Hunter in that he did seem to admit that something happened, but he qualified it as a misunderstanding. He seems to be hinting that he was threatening someone else.
That was my read of what he said. It was like someone just over this lobbyist's shoulder was who he said he was going to bitch slap, which is not much better, I don't think.
No, you certainly should. Your explanation shouldn't be that you were threatening to bitch slap a different person.
Yeah, no, it's not.
So his statement was that I have the utmost respect for Stephanie. Stephanie's the lobbyist. And I sincerely regret my word choice that was not directed at her. I welcome the Senate Rules Committee investigation to clear up this misunderstanding.
It is, yeah. I mean, I guess the idea of a bell curve,
yes,
is that everyone's behavior or performance shifts it.
Yes.
And I guess when you have like the president and Duncan Hunter claiming just wildly alleging conspiracies, everybody else's normal run-of-the-mill apologies suddenly shift forward and suddenly become much better by comparison. So
Indeed.
like that sounds like downright laudatory.
Yes.
Compared to just alleging some sort of conspiracy within the government.
Yes, but we should still remember the
That
incident that sparked it to
was
begin
bad.
with. It was bad.
Yes. Very.
And like I said, it would be pretty big news. Otherwise, Joel Anderson is running for the State Board of Equalization. He is termed out of the Senate seat that he holds. He's also flirted with running for supervisor in the future.
Has a campaign committee account open with quite a bit of money in it, should he
Yes.
decide to do that.
So he certainly has aspirations to continue his political career in San Diego and California.
Yes. So Joel Anderson is from East County.
Yes,
Duncan Hunter is from East County.
correct.
Diane Jacob, who is the county supervisor for the East County area, seemed to, she's a Republican. Both of those people are Republicans. She seemed to, on her own, put things together here about what was happening with East County Republicans.
Yeah, this was not part of a debate. This was just completely voluntary.
Yeah, this was not a TV crew showed up on her doorstep and she ended up saying something that she maybe regrets. She issued this on her own volition.
Yeah, and she also looped in another East County politician, Ben Colascio of El Cajon, who
Not a Republican, but yeah.
I can't even begin to ascribe the various scandals associated with him.
Google that if you guys don't know about it. Unfortunately, we don't have time to delve into that entire topic.
So she said on Twitter, "It's been a tough time for East County with 3 elected officials at the federal, state, and local levels violating the public's trust. If criminal charges against Congressman Hunter are true, he must resign. At the very least, voters must hold him accountable in November, just as they should with State Senator Anderson and El Cajon City Councilman Colascio, who've embarrassed themselves and failed those they were elected to serve. As Ronald Reagan reminded us, character matters."
Yeah. So it does remind me. I mean,
Does it, though?
yeah, well, right. I don't know that character does matter. That seems entirely open to debate at this
Feels
point.
like an adorable
Anachronism.
thing
It does. I can already see how annoying it's going to be when, the odds-on case remains that Duncan Hunter wins re-election despite this. And he and many others will scream that they have been vindicated.
Correct.
Based on it.
Yes.
And that's going to be gross.
Yeah.
Yeah. In any case, that's it, I guess. I don't know. I asked you earlier today whether it was a problem that I no longer understand anything that's going on, and you said you don't think it's a problem.
I don't think that it is.
Yeah.
Seems like everything changes too quickly
To know about.
And
Yeah.
also nothing matters
Right.
anymore, I think.
Yeah, no.
And yet here we are recording a podcast about all of it.
Anyway, I'm glad you guys listened to our thoughts for the last, 32 minutes. That's all we got this week. Thanks. Go buy your PolitiFest tickets. If you cannot buy a PolitiFest ticket, reach out to us. Let us know. We will see if there's another way to get you in the door. We want to have as many people there as possible. But it does cost money to put on, so we have to charge for it. That's all from this week at Voice of San Diego on the radio and on the podcast and all the other media entities during which we publish our thoughts and journalism.
It was great. Great sign off.
Thanks.
You're listening to the Voice of San Diego Podcast Network. Visit voiceofsandiego.org/podcast to learn more about the rest of the shows in our network. We've got Cura Chaos, a live podcast featuring interviews with movers and shakers from San Diego and Baja California, and The Kept Faith, a sports podcast. Be sure to give them a try, and thanks for listening.